Do you need to train in a gym?
No, that's a stupid question. Why did you ask me that?
Oh, it was something that you were asked by somebody on a who was looking to work with you.
No, 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 no. He asked me, do the programs that I deliver through the Phil Timon letter require a gym? That's what he asked. That's a very
Yeah.
different question to do you need to train at a gym? But I will now answer your question about why you don't need to train in a gym. Because I actually have changed my opinion on this quite dramatically in the last few years. It was COVID really that was my wake up call, actually, because obviously the gyms were shut because we all had to hide under our bed, otherwise the government would arrest us because there was a cold going around. And I came to realize that, hey, all this bodyweight training has real practical application. If you recall those pictures of me after Connie was born, I'm actually in pretty good nick, even though I'd not trained in the gym for months at that point. I'd
Mm.
just been doing bodyweight training in the shared garden out the back of our flat and running a lot, and I looked pretty okay. The other thing I found really surprising was how much strength I maintained through that period. I lost barely any strength. I lost strength because I lost a lot of weight. Because if you recall, when the lockdown
Mm.
started, I was in fat mode, wasn't I? Because I was chasing that 220 kilo squat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not a good time for my looks. Do you remember the pants of shame that we bought? The tracksuit of
I
shame.
do.
The tracksuit of shame that I had to wear. But it was I went into that with my eyes open because I really wanted that squat. Um, so I lost strength because I lost a lot of weight. But yeah, no, that was all maintained through a diet of just hundreds and hundreds of bodyweight squats, push-ups, handstand push-ups, chin-ups off the branch from the tree outside, if you remember. And we had the rope as well, didn't we? That I hang over one of the
Yeah.
things to do rope pull-ups and stuff. And as I say, of course, running. So that kind of made me wake up to the fact that, hey, maybe there is something to this bodyweight training thing. And then I started to think even more, and I looked at people who did a lot of bodyweight training in the gym, because remember the gym in Bournemouth put that CrossFit area in,
Yeah.
and I started to see people doing a lot of bodyweight training, and I'm like, the people who are doing majority bodyweight training, on average, look better than the people who are just lifting weights. And the reason for that's very simple: that you can't do bodyweight exercises if you're fat or weak. You just can't. They're naturally limiting. If you're fat, you won't be able to do the more advanced bodyweight training exercise. You'll be able to do pull-ups. If you're strong and fat, you'll be able to do pull-ups and stuff like that. But you absolutely won't be able to do the more advanced variations, one-arm pull-ups, stuff like that. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And obviously, weak is self-explanatory, because you can be thin and you can be really weak and not do a single pull-up. I know loads of people like that. So I said, yeah. And I thought about it and I extrapolated. And I'm like, if you put 1,000 people who train bodyweight only in a room and 1,000 people who only lift weights in a room, and you compare their physiques and their athletic capability, I reckon that you'll have the bodyweight guys will be in better shape on average.
Mm.
I genuinely believe that. Um, and then I got to thinking even more, and I thought, because I went straight into lifting weights. I remember the first time I did a set of 10 pull-ups. I've been training for nearly a year. It took me nearly a year to be able to do a set of 10 pull-ups. And obviously, I spent my teenage years playing World of Warcraft, not doing sports and stuff. So my general physical preparedness was very low, and I believe that bodyweight training would be a better way to start training for someone, especially for someone like me who's not really done much sport or done running or anything like that as a kid or as a young adult. I think the bodyweight training would be better, because you do build this base of strength, flexibility, all of that stuff that you need to be able to lift weights efficiently, effectively, and most of all safely. Because I blew my back out within about 3 or 4 months of deadlifting, for example, and I put that down to having a weak core. I don't like using the word core, but I'll use it here because it's suitable for our purposes. And I think it was that lack of core strength which you build by doing things like push-ups. Because you're in a push-up position. What are you doing? You're kind of doing a plank, aren't you? You're isometrically contracting your abs and things, and that builds a lot of strength. So that will enable you to maintain position under load with when you deadlift, for example. There will be some carryover. And if you, as I say, if you go into training without that, I think it's fair to say that your risk of injury is higher, certainly. So yeah, so no, to answer your question, you absolutely don't need a gym. Body weight training, potentially the best way to start. In fact, actually, no, let's not sit on the fence. I think body weight training is absolutely the best way to start if you've not been particularly active. And there are more advanced variations of bodyweight training that you can progress towards that will help your physique and performance in much the same way as barbell based strength training. But let's not pretend this is an either or. I think you should, I think do both. Do both. So while you can train without going to the gym, should you? Probably not, because you don't have to do one or the other. Do both. But if you don't want to go to the gym, that's fine. You can still build a great body by doing bodyweight training only.
Can you talk a bit more about general physical preparedness and how that
Yeah,
correlates to dad strength and general practical
yeah.
use in life?
So GPP is like a term that a lot of coaches use to describe, well, general physical capacity for basic exercise. And you build it by doing things like, as I say, running, push-ups, basic strength training, that sort of stuff. And we want to know why it's important. Well, it's important because what can happen if you're not very careful is that your ability to apply the strength that you build will be limited to the specific exercises you do in the gym. So I had this problem for a number of years, actually, where I was very, very strong in the gym, but it became very apparent to me actually when I moved into my first flat, and I was, as I say, very strong in the gym, but I was genuinely struggling, like shifting furniture up the stairwell, which only had about 10 steps to get into my first floor flat, 10, 15 steps, I think it was. And it wasn't even particularly steep, but I was finding it quite hard to manipulate and maneuver all this thing. And then obviously when I was in the ambulance service, I was doing the heart team at the time, which um, was involved a lot of extracting people from difficult positions, basically. So it's not necessarily dramatic. You have someone who, say, an overweight elderly person who's fallen in an upstairs bedroom, for example. They called the heart team out because we were a team of 6 medics, and we had access to lots of extrication equipment like special stretchers and things like that. And I was able to do the job very well. But one thing that I was absolutely amazed by was these blokes, these old blokes who I work with, some of them in their like late 50s, early 60s. And they seemed to have an easier time of doing the lifting and shifting than I did, even though I was like really, really strong in the gym. So GPP, getting out and about, moving around, doing things like loaded carries, where walking around in a weight vest or doing like farmers walks, things like that. It builds up this strength that you can use outside the gym, and that's kind of what I call dad strength. So it's that ability for fathers to, when you're a kid and you look at your dad and he's just able to lift these monstrously heavy things, or appear so to you very easily. And I say it's GPP is the key to actually building that.
You throw
Throw your kid around, stuff like that, and you look at the difference between me now, say with Marcus, to how I was with Connie.
Yeah.
Like obviously, what I maintained things very well during COVID, but I'd still hitherto not done a lot of the GPP work, so I was still kind of had a bit of that problem, and it did show in lifting and shifting Connie, getting her in and out the BMW that we had at the time. I could do it, but it wasn't as easy as I felt that it should be. And now, like, you see me with Puppy, and it's like, little Marcus, he's.
And I've certainly experienced exactly the same thing. I could barely get her in and out in her car seat because they're of the awkward angles, despite being able to do a squat in the gym.
Well, yeah, you're a classic example of that, aren't you? Because you didn't really want to do exercise, so I'm like, okay, well, do the most efficient and effective thing, which is barbell-based strength training, which made massive improvements to your physique, health more generally.
Yeah.
But the ability for you to apply that strength, also cope with your pregnancy and stuff.
Yeah.
And the aftermath of that was restricted because that baseline strength and cardiovascular fitness, because
Yeah.
both of those things just wasn't there.
Yeah, definitely.
Just before we move on, actually, another example of this, you see it a lot. I've seen it a lot. I don't, I don't watch fitness content because it does my nut in, but YouTube knows that I work in the fitness industry, so it does recommend it to me. And the amount of young people in their 20s with like cracking bodies, like six packs and all that, they struggle to run a mile. There's videos like, oh, I'm going to run a mile every day for a month, and like as a challenge or whatever, and they really bloody struggle with it. They look great, they're really strong, and they struggle to run a mile. That's shocking to me.
Yeah, it's not
It's absolutely shocking to me.
healthy.
Well, no, of course it's not. Of course it's not. And I genuinely believe those people are going to come cropper,
Yeah.
come their 30s, 40s, so on.
Certainly not the best way to live.
Well, I know it's all vanity. It's pure vanity.
Yeah. So let's change gear entirely and talk about rest. The importance of rest, days, weeks, months, when to take rest, when you're just being a pussy.
Oh yeah, rest. Yeah, it's funny. I cracked this one really early on, really, really, really early on. My first year of training, I didn't take a week off because I was just obsessed, as often happens with new things, and I have a tendency towards getting obsessed with things when they're new and exciting to me. And I didn't take, and to be fair, I was 19, and I was working part time, and everything was fine, and so I had the time to just spend in the gym and train and not take a week off. But I remember I went up to see my university halls before I moved into them, and I remember feeling really, really bad that day, like really tired and kind of tired of the gym as well. Like I've been training a year, and I'm like, oh, I've had enough of this. So I was like, can I take a week off? And I remember Googling, when to take a week off the gym. Is it okay to take a week off the gym? I was stood at the bloody bus stop waiting for the bus to go back to. There's a bus stop directly opposite the main entrance. I was sitting to go back to Bristol Parkway station. It's Parkway, isn't it? Temple Meads and Parkway. It was going back to Bristol Parkway station. And I was sitting at the bus stop Googling, is it, will I lose all my muscle if I take a week off? And I know loads of people Google these things because it comes up as the auto suggestions, And I remember reading this article and it was like, oh yeah, you probably want to take a week off every like 8 to 10 weeks or so. And I was like, what?
Oops.
And then I did it. And I was really terrified the whole time that I was going to lose everything. And I didn't. And I kind of just felt roughly the same when I went back to the gym. And funnily enough, performance improved. Ever since then, I've been pretty good at taking a week off every 8 to 12 weeks. I think the longest I've gone is about 16 weeks without a full week off training. Yeah, rest's really important. There's a bit of a cliche, but it is true that your muscles grow outside the gym. Neurological improvements happen outside the gym. All these, it doesn't happen in the gym. Trainings provide the stimulus. You need to recover from that stimulus to get the adaptation. That's the basic, training 101. It's how it works. So you can absolutely train too much. But one thing I am very skeptical of is the concept of overtraining, as it's thrown about by people on the internet. Overtraining is absolutely a thing, but it typically only affects, true overtraining typically only affects advanced trainees, athletes, things like that. It is possible to become overtrained to a lesser extent as a normal person, but it's not the stimulus in the gym that's making it that way. It's your lifestyle, diet, sleep, work, family stress, all that other stuff is playing a part more so than what you're doing in the gym. That's not to say that it won't lead you to overtrain. It just it reduces your capacity to recover from your training. The problem manifests in a similar way, but it's a different problem.
Yeah.
But it manifests, and the solution is different too. Even though the symptoms are broadly the same, and the consequences of not dealing with it are broadly the same as well. So yeah, rest days. It's hard because this conversation is going, what's the optimal days a week that you should train? How often should you take a week off? And I can't answer any of those questions because they are specific to the individual. I've done training routines whilst working a corporate job. I remember I trained 6 days a week in a corporate job, and I was working a corporate job that was very long and very long hours and very stressful. And I was doing heavy compound lifting. I was doing full body training 6 days a week, That was the setup of what I was doing, and that would be completely and utterly inappropriate for most people under the life circumstances that I was in. Or sorry, under the same sort of work circumstances as me. But what doesn't you don't take into account is the way that I was living at the time. I'd optimized my entire life to be built around training, so of course I could do that. Similarly, when I was in the ambulance service, there were periods where I would have these big gaps in my rota, so I could, I'd have like 6 to 10 days off just as part of the rota. But that also meant that there were weeks where I was absolutely smashed doing a minimum of 48 hours in the week, long 12-hour shifts. So on those long periods of time off, I would train sometimes 3 times a day, and was making consistent, steady progress because I optimized my training in such a way as to work with the rota. Again, something that it's always circumstance specific. It's always circumstance specific. So there is no optimal. I think the you could. I think basically there's a couple of fears that are unfounded. The first one is that you training too much is a problem, because it's not necessarily a problem. If you train, 5 or 6 days a week, you'll overtrain. That's not necessarily true, but a lot of people believe it firmly. Likewise, people think, if you only train 2 days a week, you won't make any progress. Again, not true. We're training 2 days a week at the moment. And we're making stellar progress because of, that's just the nature of the beast of what with what we're doing the rest of our lives and things. So yeah, it's a complicated question, the question of rest. It's a bit of a rubbishy question for a podcast because I can't even provide a definitive answer. It's something that even resembles a definitive answer,
Kind of a question, kind of going to give you the answer too.
Okay.
But walking is, I think, the key to a good rest week. Don't just flob and eat everything. Why is walking so important?
Well, walking's not really exercise, is it? It's not certainly not training. I'd struggle to qualify as that. I suppose it meets the technical definition of exercise, but it's not sort of fundamental. There's scientists, biologists use categorize life by having certain characteristics, one of which is movement.
Yeah.
So I always find when people are walking as exercise, I'm like, well, I suppose it technically is, but it's also a fundamental characteristic of being alive. So it's not really, but no, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Walking is important. Everyone should do it every day without fail for at least 30 minutes, if not 45 minutes or an hour. It's not going to tire you out. Subject to the obvious caveat of you not having cancer or something. If you're seriously ill, then obviously there's that. Maybe that's not the best thing to do. Or injured, I've got a broken leg. It's probably not a good idea to walk on that. Just speculating. But for otherwise fit, healthy, and ordinary people, it's just a quick and easy win, right? We talked about GPP earlier. Walking is GPP work. When your feet are whacking against the pavements, right? That's putting a shock stimulus, for want of a better term, up through your ankles, your hips, your knees, your back, which will toughen you up generally. Not much, and the it won't toughen you up by much, but it will toughen you up a little bit. Mentally, it will toughen you up when you go out when it's a bit windy or a bit cold or a bit wet. You deal with being uncomfortable. If you walk properly, i.e., not so slow that a snail would overtake you, and not so fast that you're practically running, you'll get the cardiovascular workout in there as well.
Yeah, and the benefits of sticking to a routine, doing something every day that's part of maintaining discipline, right?
Well, yeah, it is, and that then
it
makes fitness a fixed, firm part of your life, and then from there, it's much easier to maintain a gym routine. Because you're doing all this walking, so you might as well go to the gym, and you'll want to as well. Because going to the gym, if you walk every day without fail, I can almost guarantee that you will get through your workouts faster, provided you don't spend minutes upon minutes staring at boobies on Instagram. Your workouts will be faster because you'll be fitter, and it won't be something you need to consciously monitor either. They just will be faster. You shave off. You're going to do the maths for me now because I can't do maths, but Yeah, say you're doing 20 sets in your workout, inclusive of warm-ups and so on. You're 20 sets, right? And if you bring your average rest period down from 3 minutes per set to 2.5 minutes per set,
It's 10 minutes.
that's 10 minutes. Yeah, that's not a big difference, is it? So you say you just shave 10 minutes off your workout.
Yeah.
There you are, just from walking every day.
Yeah.
And I can't promise that will happen, but you'll almost certainly, as I provided you don't muck about between your rest periods, you will almost certainly do your workouts faster, which will make them less intrusive into your life, which will make you more likely to comply with them for the long term.
Yeah. Great.
Cool.